In the silent cold of space, a small alien exploration ship called Vigilance drifted through the stars. It was an old ship, built for deep space missions, but its crew was skilled. Captain Neller stood in front of the view screen, his sharp eyes scanning the endless darkness. The crew moved quietly behind him, aware that something didn't feel right. It had started with a simple signal, a strange, weak transmission from deep within uncharted space. The signal was old, much older than any modern communications. It came from a sector filled with forgotten ruins, human ruins. "They never expected us to come this far," muttered Turl, the ship's navigator. "No one has ever returned from that part of space. They say it's cursed." Captain Neller didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed focused on the screen, narrowing as the ship got closer to the signal source. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. The humans had been one of the strongest species in the galaxy, but their ships had vanished long ago, lost to time and war. The Vigilance had been sent to investigate. The Alien Council believed there was nothing left to discover. They thought the humans were weak, their fleets long gone. But the signal was different. It was alive. "Captain, I'm getting something," said Jax, the ship's engineer from the control panel. His voice was low, a hint of worry in it. "Energy readings are off the charts. The ship we're approaching. It's still active." Neller turned to face Jax, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice cold. "Yes, sir. It's not just a wreck. Whatever it is, it's still operational. But I can't make sense of it. The energy patterns are all wrong." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Most of them had seen ancient, derelict ships before, but this was different. The humans hadn't been heard from in centuries. No one had expected to find anything alive out here. The ship grew larger on the screen, revealing its shape. A massive, dark warship, a once proud human design. It was too quiet, too still. There was no life sign, no movement. The Vigilance crept closer, its engines humming softly, unsure of what to expect. "Captain, I'm detecting no signs of life," said Mira, the sensor specialist. "Nothing organic, no heat signatures, but something inside is sending out a signal." "Prepare for docking," Neller ordered. He turned toward his crew. "We'll board it. Whatever this ship is, it's important. We need to know what happened to the humans." The crew of Vigilance suited up in their space gear and prepared to board the ancient warship. The air was tense, and the ship felt more like a tomb than a vessel. No one spoke as they gathered their equipment and moved toward the airlock. Outside, the vast warship loomed in front of them, casting a long shadow over the Vigilance. Its hull was battered, showing signs of old battles, but it still stood strong, defying the ravages of time. It was hard to believe that such a ship could still be here, abandoned but somehow alive. As the airlock opened and the crew boarded, the atmosphere inside was colder than expected. The lights flickered on, casting a dim, ghostly glow over the walls. The ship smelled of dust and old metal, but there was something else, something wrong. The quiet hum of the ship's systems filled the air, but there were no voices, no sounds of movement, just an eerie silence. "This way," Neller said, leading the team down the narrow corridors. The walls were lined with strange, ancient tech. Some parts looked completely unfamiliar, even to the trained crew of Vigilance. They passed dark rooms, empty hallways, and closed doors. Then they reached a large chamber at the heart of the ship. At the center was a massive control panel, still glowing faintly. The crew gathered around, waiting for Neller's signal. "Open it," Neller said, nodding toward the control panel. Jack stepped forward and began working on the panel. Sparks flew as the system powered up. Slowly, the door to the chamber began to slide open. What they found inside froze them. It wasn't what they expected. Instead of discovering a decayed crew or an abandoned ship, they found a strange message burned into the metal of the wall. The words were in human script, but the language was hard to understand. Mira began translating. It was a warning. Do not enter. Leave now. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. The ship shuddered. Then came a voice, soft at first, almost a whisper. Welcome aboard. Leave now, or be tested. The crew froze. What was that? Whispered Turl, his voice shaking. Naylor's eyes widened. This wasn't a regular abandoned warship. The message, the voice, it was alive. But not in the way they expected. Naylor turned to the crew, his voice steady despite the unease creeping into his mind. Stay alert. This ship is far from empty. Something is awake. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. And then, the ship's lights suddenly turned bright. The ship was alive. The test had begun. The silence of the abandoned human warship pressed down on the crew of Vigilance like a heavy blanket. Every step echoed through the metal hallways, each footfall sounding too loud in the quiet of the ship. The crew was on edge, their eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out at them at any moment. Something's wrong, muttered Turl, the ship's navigator. He was trying to hide the unease in his voice, but even he couldn't ignore the sense of dread that was growing with every step they took deeper into the ship. Captain Naylor didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed sharp, focused. He had seen a lot in his years of command. But this felt different. The message they had found, the voice that had spoken to them, it wasn't a warning from a dead ship. It was something more. The crew continued through the dark corridors, the only light coming from the dim glow of their helmets. They reached a narrow hallway, lined with old, cracked panels. The air felt thick, almost like the ship was alive, breathing in the darkness. The walls were covered in strange symbols, foreign to even the most experienced alien linguists. This ship is ancient, Jack said, his voice barely a whisper. But the technology, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Naylor nodded. The ship's power systems, although old, were still running strong. But something was off. The energy felt different, almost too clean, too precise. As they continued, they reached a large control room. The door slid open, revealing a massive chamber. The center was dominated by a huge, circular console covered in blinking lights. The room smelled of old metal and strange chemicals, and the air was colder than it had been before. Naylor stepped forward, his eyes scanning the console. Is this the ship's central control? Mira, the sensor specialist, nodded. Yes, Captain. It looks like the main command center. Jack stepped up to the console, pulling up a holographic interface. Let's see if we can get this thing working, he muttered, his hands flying over the controls. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen flickered, then went dark. The crew tensed, expecting the worst. Then, with a sharp hum, the console came back online. A series of symbols flashed across the screen, followed by a single sentence in the alien language. Do not open. The message was clear, and it was directed at them. Naylor stepped back. Open what? His voice was low, his suspicion growing. What were the humans hiding here? Before he could say anything more, the lights in the room flickered again. This time, they didn't just blink out, they went completely dark. The crew froze, their hearts racing in the pitch-black room. The sound of air shifting, the soft hum of the ship's systems, everything stopped. Then, a low, deep growl echoed from the darkness. Get the lights back on. Naylor barked, his voice sharp with urgency. His crew scrambled, working quickly, but it felt like the darkness was closing in on them. The growl came again, louder this time, almost as if it were coming from the walls themselves. Suddenly, the lights snapped back on, bright and harsh. The crew gasped as they saw what stood in the center of the room. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was something between. The creature was tall, its body covered in thick, dark armor-like plating. Its eyes glowed with a faint red light, and its body radiated an overwhelming sense of power. It was as if it was made to destroy. The air around it felt charged, like static before a storm. But it wasn't moving. "What is that?" Tyrrell whispered, his voice shaking. He was the first to speak, but the rest of the crew was too stunned to answer. Naller didn't flinch. He stared at the creature, trying to make sense of it. "That is the reason we're here." The creature's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like it was waking up. Then, a deep voice echoed through the room, harsh, mechanical, and cold. "You have entered the domain of the human warship. You will be tested." The voice was not from the creature itself. It came from all around them. From the ship itself. The ship was alive, or at least it felt like it was. The crew stepped back, their hands instinctively moving to their weapons. They were ready to fight, but something told them that this would not be a battle they could win with force alone. "Tested?" Naller asked, his voice steady despite the growing fear. "What do you mean?" The ship answered with a sudden jolt. The walls shuddered, and the entire room seemed to tremble. The creature's eyes flickered again, brighter this time. The ship's voice responded, colder than before. "You will face what the humans feared most. Then you will understand. Leave now, or stay, and learn." For a moment, there was silence. The crew stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Then the lights dimmed again, and the temperature dropped even further. The creature's eyes locked onto them, and the entire room seemed to pulse with energy. Naylor's voice was quiet, but firm. "We're not leaving. We will learn what this ship holds. We need to understand why the humans were so afraid of it." But as the last word left his lips, the growl echoed again, louder, closer. The test had begun. The crew of Vigilance stood frozen, eyes locked on the strange creature in front of them. Its glowing red eyes pierced through the dim light, and its mechanical growls sent shivers down their spines. The air felt thick with tension, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. The creature's massive form seemed to pulse with energy, as if it was waiting for something, or someone, to make the first move. "What is that thing?" whispered Tyrrell, his voice barely audible. Naller didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His mind raced, trying to piece together everything that had happened since they first boarded this ghost ship. There was something deeply wrong about this place, something terrifying, and whatever this creature was, it was part of that. The growl echoed again, this time louder, as if in response to Tyrrell's question. The ship shuddered once more, the lights flickering as the walls seemed to close in. It was as if the entire ship was alive, aware of their presence, and it didn't want them there. Naller stepped forward, his pulse racing, but he refused to show fear. He was a captain, and it was his job to keep his crew safe. "Stay calm," he ordered, his voice steady despite the cold dread settling in his chest. "We don't know what this is yet, but we're not leaving. Not without answers." The creature's eyes flashed, its massive form shifting slightly. It didn't speak again, but the ship seemed to respond to Naller's words. The temperature dropped even further, and a deep mechanical voice filled the room. "The humans feared what was inside," the voice said, its tone cold and distant. "You will fear it too." The words sent a chill through the crew. What did it mean? What was inside? And why did the humans fear it so much? Naylor's mind raced. He had heard the stories. Rumors about the humans and their terrifying weapons, about ships that had disappeared into the void, leaving no trace behind. But none of those stories prepared him for this. The creature suddenly moved. It wasn't fast, but its movements were powerful, each step sending a vibration through the ship. It raised its arm, and a bright light shot from its hand, hitting a panel on the wall. The panel sparked and hissed, and then it began to glow with a strange, otherworldly light. "It's activating something," Mira said, his voice filled with awe and fear. "What is it doing?" Naller watched the creature closely, trying to understand what was happening. He had no idea what the creature was doing, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just some forgotten warship. This was something far more dangerous, and the humans had clearly been terrified of it. Suddenly, the ship jolted again, harder this time. The lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging the crew into darkness. Panic set in, but Naller quickly took charge. "Stay calm," he shouted. "Turn on your helmet's lights." One by one, the crew members flicked on their helmet lights, casting eerie beams into the darkness. The creature stood still, watching them, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. It seemed to be waiting for something, waiting for them to make the next move. Then, without warning, the voice spoke again. "The test begins now." The crew tensed, their weapons drawn, but Naller held up a hand to stop them. "We need to be careful," he said quietly. "Whatever this is, it's not just a creature. It's part of the ship. The ship is alive. We have to understand it." Before he could say more, the ship shuddered once more. A deep mechanical rumble filled the room, followed by a loud bang from somewhere deep within the ship. The walls seemed to vibrate, as if something massive was moving inside. "What is that?" Jax asked, his voice tight with fear. Naller didn't answer. He was already moving, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. The ship was alive, and it wasn't going to let them leave without completing the test. The crew moved quickly, checking their surroundings. The walls began to hum with energy, and the lights flickered on again, revealing a set of doors that hadn't been visible before. The doors were massive, made of thick, reinforced metal. The symbol of the human military was engraved on the surface, but it was faded and almost unreadable. "We need to go through there," Naller said, his voice resolute. "Whatever it is, it's the next step." The crew moved toward the doors, but as they got closer, the air grew heavier. The temperature seemed to drop even further, and the walls began to glow faintly with the same strange light that the creature had activated earlier. "Something's coming," Turl whispered, his voice shaking. "We need to hurry." Naller nodded. He felt it too. Whatever was behind those doors was the key to understanding the ship and to surviving whatever test it was about to give them. As the crew reached the doors, the ship trembled once more. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. The test had begun, and there was no turning back. Naller reached for the door controls, but before he could press the button, the creature's voice echoed through the ship again. "You will face what the humans feared most, and only then will you understand." The doors slid open with a loud hiss, revealing a dark chamber beyond. The crew stood at the threshold, staring into the unknown. The ship was waiting for them to step inside. And they had no choice. The doors slid shut behind the crew with a hiss, trapping them in the dark, cold chamber. The air inside felt thick, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something. The only light came from their helmets, casting long shadows across the strange, bare walls. The chamber was vast, and its design was unlike anything they had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth black metal, covered with odd symbols that glowed faintly, pulsating in the darkness. The floor was cracked and uneven, with deep grooves as if something heavy had been dragged across it long ago. Naller glanced around, his heart pounding. "Stay alert," he commanded. "This place, it feels wrong." Jax, the engineer, stepped forward cautiously, his eyes scanning the area. "There's something about this room. It's like it was made to keep something in, or keep something out." His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the room itself was listening. Suddenly, the ship's voice boomed again, this time much closer, echoing through the chamber's vast emptiness. "The test begins now. You will see what was hidden from the humans. You will understand their fear." The words sent a chill down the crew's spines. The ship was alive, speaking to them, guiding them towards something they couldn't yet understand. And that something was terrifying. Naller motioned for the crew to move forward. The chamber was unsettling, but they had no choice but to press on. The deeper they went into the ship, the more they could feel the weight of something ancient, something dangerous. something that had been forgotten for a reason. They reached the center of the chamber, where a strange device stood. It was circular, about 3 meters wide, and looked like a giant, dark sphere embedded in the floor. It was covered in more glowing symbols, some of which seemed to move, shifting in patterns they couldn't comprehend. "What is that?" Thrall asked, his voice trembling. Nadler stepped closer to the device, his eyes narrowing as he studied it. The air around it felt charged, as if it were drawing energy from the ship itself. "I don't know," he muttered, touching the edge of the device, "but I have a feeling it's the key to what we're looking for." As he made contact with the sphere, the room trembled. The symbols on the device glowed brighter, and the air grew colder. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shake as if the entire ship was waking up. Then, with a sharp hiss, the device opened, revealing a narrow passageway leading downward. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Nadler didn't hesitate. He nodded to his team. "We have to go down there. This is what the ship wants us to find." Reluctantly, the crew moved forward. The passage was tight, the walls pressing in on them as they descended deeper into the ship's bowels. The air was stale, and the smell of decay filled their nostrils. It was clear that no one had been down here in centuries, perhaps longer. They reached the bottom, and what they saw took their breath away. The room they entered was vast, far larger than any room on the Vigilance. It was a cold, empty space, but it was not abandoned. Rows upon rows of strange, metallic structures stood in the center of the room, each one pulsating with the same eerie, otherworldly light that filled the ship. The machines were connected to the walls by thick cables, and tubes of liquid ran through them, their contents glowing faintly. But it wasn't the machines that drew their attention. It was what lay at the far end of the room. In the center of a raised platform stood a large cylindrical container, about 5 meters tall. It was made of thick, transparent material, and inside was something the crew had never seen before. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was a sickly gray, its body covered in strange, pulsating veins. The creature's eyes were closed, but its face was contorted in a painful expression, as if it were trapped in a nightmare. What is that?" Jax asked, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. Nadler stepped forward, his heart pounding. "It's a human. Or at least, it was." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "But this isn't like anything the humans ever made. This thing, it's something else." As the crew moved closer, the ship's voice echoed through the room again, colder than before. "This is what the humans feared. This is what they abandoned. This is what they created." Naylor's stomach tightened. He could feel the weight of the ship's words pressing down on him. The humans had made this creature, and they had locked it away for a reason. But now, it was free. Suddenly, the creature's eyes flickered open. A deep mechanical voice filled the room, and the creature's chest rose and fell as if it were breathing. "You have awakened me," the creature said, its voice harsh and raspy. "I am the last of my kind. The humans failed. They could not control us." The room seemed to pulse with energy as the creature's words hung in the air. The crew stood frozen, unable to speak. What was this thing? Why had the humans created it? And why had they locked it away? The creature's eyes locked onto Nadler, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to grow colder. "You will see what the humans feared most," it said, its voice filled with malice. "And then you will understand why they left this ship behind." With that, the creature's body jerked violently, and the machines around the room began to hum loudly. The walls trembled, and the entire ship seemed to shake in response. The creature's eyes burned bright red, and Naylor could feel the power building inside the chamber. "It's not over," Naylor muttered, taking a step back. This is only the beginning." The room shook violently, the walls groaning as if they were on the verge of collapse. Naylor stumbled back, his heart racing. The creature's eyes burned like twin flames, and the humming of the machines grew louder, shaking the very foundation of the ship. It felt as though the entire vessel was awakening from a long slumber, and it was angry. "What is it doing?" Tyrrell shouted, his voice almost drowned out by the noise. Naylor's mind raced as he watched the creature, now fully awake and seemingly more powerful than before. Its massive form shifted within the containment tube, and with a low growl, it reached out with one hand. The metal of the tube groaned in protest, the energy within it building to an unbearable level. Suddenly, the tube shattered. It broke apart with a violent crack, sending sharp pieces of metal flying in all directions. The creature stepped out of the remains of its prison, its body towering over the crew. The air crackled with electricity, and the temperature in the room dropped to freezing levels. "Move! Get out of the way!" Naylor yelled, pushing his crew members back. His voice was firm, but he felt the dread in his chest growing stronger. The creature's eyes fixed on him, and its voice echoed once more, cold and full of rage. "You have freed me," it said, its voice shaking the walls around them. "Now you will understand what the humans feared." Before anyone could react, the creature extended its hand. The room erupted with energy, a pulse of light so bright that it blinded them for a split second. Naylor's heart skipped a beat as he saw the walls of the chamber begin to distort, twisting like they were being pulled by an invisible force. "Get to the control room," Naylor shouted. "We need to shut this down." The crew scrambled, but the creature wasn't finished. With a swift motion, it raised its arm again, and the air itself seemed to freeze. The temperature plummeted, and ice began to form on the walls, creeping along the floor and ceiling. The crew ran, but it was clear that the ship itself was no longer under their control. The creature was manipulating the very fabric of the ship, using the power it had been sealed away with to turn the vessel into a weapon. "It's too late," the creature boomed, its eyes glowing brighter. "The test is complete. Now you will pay for what the humans did to us." Naylor turned to his crew, his face grim. "We need to stop it before it destroys everything. Jax, find a way to disable the ship's systems. Mira, you're with me. We need to keep the creature occupied." Jax nodded and rushed to one of the terminals, pulling up the ship's systems with his quick hands. "I'm trying, Captain," he said, his voice filled with panic. "But the ship's systems are completely overridden. It's like it's alive." Mira followed Naylor, his weapon drawn, but his eyes kept darting back to the creature. "Captain, we don't stand a chance against it," Mira said, his voice laced with fear. Naylor clenched his fists, determination flashing in his eyes. "We have to try. We can't let it get any worse. We have to stop it from taking full control of the ship." As they approached the control room, the sound of the creature's laughter echoed through the halls. It was cold, mocking, and full of menace. "You cannot stop me. You cannot stop what was created long before your kind arrived." Naylor's blood ran cold. The creature was right. Whatever it was, it had existed long before the aliens had ever encountered humanity, and it had been sealed away for a reason. They reached the control room, but the doors slammed shut in front of them, as if the ship itself was locking them out. "It's too late, Captain," Jax's voice echoed from the comms. "The creature has already taken over the main power grid. It's only a matter of time before it controls everything." The cold, mechanical voice of the creature returned, louder than before. "The humans were weak. They could not control us. Now you will learn the price of their failure." With that, the floor beneath them began to rumble. The ship shook once more, but this time, it wasn't just a tremor. It was as if the ship was alive, its very core now being manipulated by the creature. The entire ship began to groan and twist, and the walls started to close in on them. Naylor's mind raced. "There has to be a way to fight this," he muttered, staring at the walls as they began to glow with a bright red light. "Jax, do you have anything? Anything at all?" Jax's voice crackled through the comms, filled with desperation. "I'm trying. I need more time. The ship's systems are locked down tight. I'm not sure how long I can keep it from fully powering up." The creature's laughter rang out again, sending a chill down Naylor's spine. "You're running out of time," it said, its voice growing more powerful with every word. "Soon, you will see the true power of what humanity created. And then, you will die like all the others." Naylor gritted his teeth. He had no choice. He would stop the creature or die trying. He turned to Mira, his expression hardening. "We need to get to the central core. If we can reach it, we might be able to shut down the ship before it's too late." Mira nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Lead the way, Captain." The rumbling continued, and the crew ran, hoping that they weren't too late to stop the rising threat. The ship was alive with chaos. The walls groaned as though in pain, and the ground beneath their feet trembled with every passing second. Naylor and his crew moved quickly, their breaths shallow, their hearts racing. The creature's power was growing stronger, and time was running out. "We're almost there," Naylor shouted, leading the way through the twisting, dark corridors of the ship. His mind raced. They had to reach the central core. If they could shut it down, maybe, just maybe, they could stop the creature's rampage. But they had no idea how much time they had left. "The core's in sight," Mira called out, pointing ahead. The glow of the central control room was visible through a shattered door at the end of the hall. "We're too late." Naylor stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing. The lights flickered, and the temperature plummeted as the room ahead seemed to ripple with energy. "Stay focused," he barked, trying to suppress the fear that threatened to grip his chest. "We can still do this." The walls trembled once more, but this time, it wasn't the ship's internal systems at work. The creature's laughter filled the air, colder than ever before. It wasn't just speaking now. It was controlling the entire ship. "You think you can stop me?" The voice of the creature echoed, filling every corner of the ship. "You are nothing. Your technology is nothing. Your strength is nothing." Suddenly, the lights went out. The entire corridor was swallowed by darkness. The only sound was the hum of energy in the walls and the faint, chilling laughter of the creature. Naylor cursed under his breath. "Jax, we need power to the central core. Now." Jax's voice came through the comms, distorted and strained. "I'm trying, Captain, but the creature's interference is too strong. I can't override the systems." Naylor clenched his fists. They were so close, but it felt like the walls were closing in on them, physically and mentally. Every second that passed, the creature was getting closer to winning. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The floor beneath their feet split open, sending chunks of metal flying. From the darkness, a massive figure emerged, a humanoid shape, glowing with an eerie red light. The creature itself had arrived, towering over them with glowing eyes that burned like fire. Naylor's heart pounded as he drew his weapon. "Get ready," he shouted, knowing that they couldn't back down now. The creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. "You should have stayed away," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You have no idea what you have unleashed. I will make you suffer, just like the humans did." "We'll stop you," Naylor shouted, his voice filled with defiance. "We'll never let you have control." The creature's eyes flashed brighter, and with a sudden, violent motion, it raised its arm. A surge of energy shot out from it, crashing into the walls and sending sparks flying. The entire corridor shook, and the floor buckled beneath their feet. Naylor jumped back, narrowly avoiding being crushed. "We need to move now," he yelled, as the crew scattered. The creature's power was overwhelming, and they couldn't afford to be caught in its path. "We're running out of time," Mira called out, firing his weapon at the creature. The blast seemed to have no effect, merely bouncing off its glowing skin. "I've got it," Jax shouted through the comms. "I'm bypassing the ship's firewall. I'll need a minute to override the core's systems." The creature turned its gaze toward Jax. You think you can stop me by hacking a machine? It sneered. You are fools. The crew didn't have a choice. They had to hold off the creature long enough for Jax to finish his work. Nadler and Mira fired at the creature, but their weapons did little to slow it down. The creature seemed invulnerable, its energy growing with every second. Keep it busy, Nadler shouted. Jax, hurry. Jax's hands flew across the terminal, his fingers moving in a blur as he worked to disable the creature's control over the ship. Just a few more seconds, he called, his voice tinged with desperation. The creature advanced, its massive form blocking their only escape. This ends now, it growled, and with a flick of its wrist, the ground beneath them cracked open, sending flames licking toward the crew. No, Nadler shouted. With a final, desperate leap, he tackled Mira, knocking them both out of the way just as the flames surged toward them. Jax, now! Nadler screamed, his heart racing. Suddenly, there was a loud mechanical hiss. The lights flickered back on, and the walls of the ship trembled. The ship's systems powered down, and the creature staggered, its body writhing as the control it had held over the ship was yanked away. Jax's voice came through the comms, triumphant. I did it. The cores shutting down. The creature let out a final, ear-piercing scream as the power it had drawn from the ship started to fade. It clawed at the air, but the light in its eyes began to dim, its massive body losing its glow. You cannot stop me, it whispered, but its voice was weak, fading. Nadler stood, breathing heavily as he stared at the creature. We already have. With one last shudder, the creature collapsed, its body crumbling to dust as its energy dissipated into the cold, silent air. The ship, once alive with energy, now fell into a deep, unnatural stillness. The crew stood in the silence, exhausted but victorious. They had done the impossible. They had stopped the creature and prevented the destruction of their ship. But Nadler knew this was only a temporary victory. The creature was gone, but its legacy, what it had represented, still lingered in the depths of the ship. Let's get out of here, Nadler said, his voice low. And we need to make sure no one else ever finds this place. The silence that followed the creature's defeat was deafening. The ship's systems were quiet, the low hum of the engines barely audible. It was over. The danger had passed. But Nadler and his crew could feel the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them, heavy and inescapable. They stood in the center of the control room, breathing heavily, eyes scanning the now dormant systems. The creature that had nearly destroyed them, that had controlled their ship, was gone, but in its place was something far more unsettling, a lingering sense of dread. Is it really over? Mira's voice was quiet, filled with unease. He looked at the remains of the ship's control systems, which were slowly starting to stabilize. Nadler didn't answer right away. He was staring at the empty space where the creature had once stood. Its twisted, monstrous form was now nothing but dust, but the echoes of its words still haunted him. It's over for now, Nadler replied, his voice low. He turned to face his crew. But we're not finished. There's more to this than we understand. The crew exchanged wary glances. They had fought a terrifying battle, but the question that lingered in the back of their minds remained unanswered. How had the creature come to be? What had the humans done to create such a being? And what had it wanted? Jax, still at the terminal, cleared his throat. Captain, he said, his voice steady but concerned. There's something else I'm picking up. It's a signal coming from deep within the ship. I think it's trying to reboot. Nadler's eyes narrowed. Trying to reboot? Yes, Jax continued. It looks like some kind of backup system. This creature may have been destroyed, but it seems like its influence is still lingering. It's embedded in the core systems. There might be other remnants we haven't seen. Nadler frowned. The feeling in his gut twisted with the realization that this wasn't truly over. The creature's power had been a part of the ship's systems, and if any part of it remained, it could come back. The battle was not just physical. They were up against something far deeper, something embedded in the ship's very soul. "Can we stop it?" Mira asked, his eyes scanning the flickering terminals with apprehension. "We have to," Naller said firmly. "We can't risk leaving it like this. If this creature's influence is still inside the systems, it could reawaken at any moment." The crew moved quickly, Jax working to trace the signal, his fingers flying over the keyboard. As he analyzed the data, his face grew darker. "It's embedded too deeply in the core systems. This isn't something we can just shut down with a button." Naller clenched his fists. "Then we'll have to find another way. We can't let it escape." Mira stepped forward. "Captain, I don't like the way this is heading. We've already fought too hard to make it this far. What if we're just digging our own graves by messing with the ship's core?" Naller turned to Mira, his gaze unwavering. "If we leave this unchecked, we risk the lives of every ship and crew in the galaxy. This ship is dangerous. It has a legacy we can't ignore. We need to destroy it completely." There was no argument after that. The crew, though uncertain, knew that Naller was right. This ship, this cursed vessel, had brought them too close to the edge. If there was any chance of something surviving, something being left behind, they had to find it and destroy it. They made their way to the heart of the ship, where the core systems were housed. It was a place of quiet power, and now, it seemed, it was a place of danger. "The reboot signal is coming from here," Jax said, pointing at a large metallic door that led into a darkened chamber. "This is it," Naller said, his voice tense. He didn't want to think about the consequences of failing. They were too close now. Everyone stay alert. The door opened with a hiss, revealing the central core, an enormous chamber filled with flickering lights, glowing cables, and humming machinery. In the center of it all was the massive heart of the ship, a pulsating core of energy that seemed almost alive. Jack stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he accessed the console. "I'm going to cut the power. We'll overload the core and completely shut down the system." Naller nodded. "Do it." But before Jax could finish inputting the final command, a low rumble filled the chamber. The lights flickered, and the entire room seemed to shudder in response. The creature's presence, though faint, was still there, deep within the systems, just waiting for the slightest mistake. "It's fighting back," Jax shouted, his fingers flying across the console. "The core's resistance is too strong. It's pulling power from every backup system." Nailer's heart raced. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. "We have to finish this." With a final, desperate motion, Jax hit the command key. The core lit up with a brilliant, blinding light, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then, with a deafening explosion, the ship's power systems overloaded. The core crackled with intense energy, sending shockwaves through the entire vessel. The backup systems were fried, the last remnants of the creature's control disintegrating in the explosion. As the light faded, the ship went silent, truly silent, for the first time in what felt like forever. "It's done," Jax said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The creature is gone." Naller exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling over him. They had done it. They had destroyed the legacy of the creature. But in doing so, they had also destroyed the ship. The battle had cost them dearly, but they had survived. "Let's get out of here," Naller said. "There's nothing left for us here." As they left the chamber, Naller cast one last glance at the wreckage they'd left behind. The ship, now nothing more than a ghost of its former self, drifted in the darkness of space. It had been a weapon, a vessel of terror, and now it was nothing. The crew made their way back to their own ship, their steps heavy but resolute. They had faced an unimaginable enemy, and they had won. But Naller knew one thing for sure. The universe was full of secrets, and there would always be more battles to fight. As they ascended into the stars, Leaving the wreckage behind, the crew of the Eclipse knew one truth: they would always carry the weight of what they had learned. There were things in the galaxy that even the bravest of aliens feared, and what they had faced was only the beginning.